Good evening, sir. Welcome to Research Cell, Dayanand Sagar University. We have with us,
Evening.
advantage of our viewers, we have with us today Dr. Atish Chattopadhyay, Director IFM Business School and the Honorable Vice Chancellor of Vijay Bhumi University, who is going to be with us for some time and help clarify the new education policy 2020 as it stands for all the stakeholders. So welcome, sir, and I am very, very thankful that you have given us the time today to share your perspective as one of the very innovative and thought leaders in the education space. And from you, when we hear, I think we get more clarity on the new policy that we are all talking about. So welcome again, sir. Welcome.
Thank you. So first of all, great pleasure being here. And I think the new education policy, which is coming after, almost 34 years, last one happened in 1986. I think that's something which is, very contextual, given the fact that the requirement post I would say the technology revolution that has happened, the kind of aspirations that has changed, the education policy needs to keep pace with the changes that is happening in the environment. I think the new education policy is a big step in that direction. I will like to give you a short overview as to what it is about, covering two aspects. First, the higher education, and next the school education. I think as far as the higher education is concerned, the most important aspect is the rigidity which exists in the present system. The new education policy tries to make the system far more flexible and far more student friendly. Okay, which means that for a student, it is now possible to take courses across disciplines, which is basically multidisciplinary, approach in education, which is a big change. It also talks about holistic development, and instead of making functional specialists. So to put it in a very simple language, in India, we find when a student takes admission in a college, they are attached to a stream. So they are either in the engineering or in business or in science, like that. So there is very little possibility of somebody to actually discover. Now, the whole issue of exploration, experimentation needs to be facilitated. The way I read the policy is that the policy allows the student to experiment and explore across disciplines. So you can take music and performing arts, maybe with science and engineering, and so combine maybe humanities. So it's a broad spectrum. And if we are talking about future, we are talking about a generation which is going to live for 100 years, which means people would like to probably work till around the age of 80, those who are today in college, which also means there will be multiple careers. And if one has to get into multiple careers at the college level, one needs exposure across disciplines to understand what they're good at. And number two, it is the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn, which is very important. And a multidisciplinary approach to education makes that feasible. So I think the first change which the education policy talks about is holistic and multidisciplinary approach towards education. This is a welcome step. That is number one. Number two, multiple entry and exit. I think that is a very important step which has been announced in the education policy, which means, one need not get into a college and continue for full 3 or 4 years. If as a student, if somebody wants to be, say, a coder, okay, I'm just taking an example, or a software developer, I can just do 1 year program in software development, come out with a certificate, get into a job. I can come back after 2 years, do 1 more year, get out with a diploma. Okay, And if I want to come back again, I can again complete another 1 year and get a graduation. I think this is a very welcome step which creates, entry into a college, having education, going back to work, coming back. So it creates a lot of flexibility. And it also can create an apprenticeship approach towards education, okay, which is something, another very welcome step. And a continuation of this, if we have to look at it, when we are talking about multiple entry and exit, it need not be in one single institution, the way I read the policy, because it talks about the transfer of credit and academic bank for credits, which means I can accumulate credit in an institution in, say in Bangalore, in AA college, I can go to Delhi for work. I've got a 1 year certificate. I can take another 1 year over there, come back to Bombay for the third job. That is feasible. Today, today's generation is a mobile generation. And this education policy also facilitates that mobility, both multiple entry and exit, and also an opportunity to study across institutions at various types. So I may be somebody who want to do, maybe fine arts in Shantiniketan, maybe engineering in an IIT, and maybe, sociology in JNU. Why it cannot be possible? I think the new education policy, probably the intention is to make that feasible for a student. Okay. So the whole, the concept of academic bank for credits and multiple entry and exit is another very important step, I would say, which can revolutionize education. Number 3, the whole issue of colleges becoming autonomous degree granting institutions, and there is a time frame of around 15 years. Today, there is a huge number of colleges which are now affiliated to a large, university. For example, Delhi University or a Bombay University or a Kolkata University. Now, what happens now is that colleges becomes independent, autonomous degree granting institution and phasing out of the affiliation system. I think that's a very big step. So each college can become autonomous institutions by itself. And corollary to this, the policy talks about graded autonomy. It talks about all 3 aspects of autonomy, which is academic, administrative, as well as financial. Also the fact that we are talking about a student taking courses across different types of institutions. Just now I talked about someone doing fine arts in Shantiniketan and technology in IIT and maybe sociology in JNU. Okay, so it becomes imperative that the regulation also facilitates this, and the policy talks about a single regulator. So we don't have a UGC separate or a AICTE separate like that. So it's a single regulator for higher education institutions. The other very important thing is that, common norms for both public and private higher education institutions, which means there is no differentiation between private and public higher education institutions, and if you look at the international scenario, universities like Stanford, etc., are nothing but private universities. Here, I think this differentiation between private and public through this policy is going to be done away with, and the investment in education is stated to be 6% of the GDP. I think these are all welcome steps as far as higher education is concerned. I'm very bullish about this.
Okay, sir. Actually, the next big question, which is on everybody's whenever such a nice policy is done, is what do you think would be the execution timelines, the possible challenges, opportunities? What can people look forward to, all stakeholders basically?
See, there are 2 types of institutions currently in India. One are the legacy institutions, okay, which has got a legacy of more than 100 years, okay, and which has got a large number of colleges affiliated to them. Take, for example, a Calcutta University or a Bombay University. Okay, that is number one. So for these legacy institutions to change, I think it will be a, you know, a little bit of a challenge, I would say. Okay. Two, there are some, institutions which are, standalone high performing institutions like the IITs, the IIMs, the Indian Institute of Science, the TIFRs of the world. Now, the question is, the policy also says that the standalone institutions to become multidisciplinary. Okay. And there's a time frame also. Okay. But, every institution has got its DNA. For a standalone institution to become multidisciplinary will require a change in DNA. Okay. And that, to my mind, is a challenge. Okay. Now, whether you can forcibly do it, or whether you want to organically do it, that is something to be thought about. But I would say it is better to go for the low hanging fruits, which means there's a large number of new universities coming up. The new universities, the new age universities that comes up today, okay, and now we are not differentiating between private and public. For them to be in sync with this policy is far more easier. And probably some of the new universities which are coming up, and you talked about my background of being representing Vijayabhumi University. For example, from the very beginning, we thought about the four anchors: discovery, holistic development, social responsibility, and professionalism. Now, the structure of the program is such that the first 2 years, students take actually course across different baskets, okay, and then explore where they are good at. And then they decide which degree to take, which is very different from the way we have. We say that, okay, you get into a program like Bachelor of Business or a BBA. Okay. In this case, you are saying you come in, you do courses in design, you do courses in data science, you do course in law, you do course in humanities, in business. After 2 years, you find out what combination you want. Okay. For a university which is coming up now, or is a new university, for them to be in sync with this policy is far more easier than a legacy institution, which has got its own complexities involved. So I think that going forward, we will see that, this coexistence will happen, just like you see, because I'm taking an example from marketing. You see the coexistence of both traditional retail and modern trade retail, which is you have got the Raj malls, also you have got the small kiranas. So you will have both these kind of institutions coexisting. There will be a transition. What will be that length of the transition? That is anybody's guess. But I think the new age universities, the new universities will be far more aligned to the new education policy, and will be actually, they are far more empowered today than what it was earlier. And I think that will create a different kind of a momentum in the education space. And as probably these new universities prove that they are actually churning out graduates which are probably more, aligned to the needs of the society and the industry, I think the legacy institutions will be changing. Okay, more than the policy, it is the demonstration effect which makes that change happen.
In this context, what about the advent of foreign universities into our country, or the potential benefits that can be reaped out of it, or are there challenges more than the benefits?
See, the point is that we are talking about, the foreign universities coming into India. Let us see how it works out. My experience is that the universities which are tied up with the Indian schools, they will probably benefit far more than stand, just or if the foreign university comes on its own. See, ultimately, it is the market acceptance. I don't want to name some of the foreign universities which wanted to start off in India, were not as successful as the, if you as successful as they expected. So for foreign university is not just about the, the degree from a particular university. It is also about the aspiration of studying in a foreign country. Okay. Now, whether that aspiration will change, okay, that somebody is looking at a foreign university, probably not just for the degree from a foreign university, but also the fact that you go and work in that country, you experience that culture, all that is a combination. So a foreign university coming in India, to what extent it is going to be, making a huge difference, I don't know. Personally speaking, if you ask me, from a teaching standpoint, Indian teachers are very good. Okay. As good as any of their international counterparts. Okay. So until and unless the foreign university creates a substantially high value, okay, uh, you will find that I don't find too much of a threat from the foreign university, and I don't think that the foreign universities will jump into India, because the Indians are quite competitive, and the Indian market always wants something which is of very high value.
But there are also, observations that are made that Indian university or Indian institutions do not figure as much in the global rankings as other international institutions. How do you address that, or what's your view on that?
See, if you look at the Indian universities, there was never that much of a need to figure into global rankings, because there is the pipeline of students. If you look at a school abroad, okay, they are dependent on the international students. For them, it is very important to figure into international rankings. Correct. Indian schools never geared themselves or never prepared themselves for international rankings. Now just think of it, also international rankings, there are 2-3 aspects to it. I'm just taking, for example, take the space of management education. Okay. First of all, you need the international accreditation, which Indian institutions never went for. If you take the management institutions, you either need to be EQUIS, which is the European accreditation, or the AACC, which is the American accreditation. Until and unless you are accredited by either of the two, you cannot get into an FT ranking for that matter. Now, moment that accreditation started happening, you see that there are schools, there are so many schools now which are in the top 100. If you look at the management schools. So IIM Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Calcutta, okay, Udaipur, ISB, they're all figuring today. Okay. So I don't think that Indian schools are, what I call, are not good enough to figure into the ranking. Only thing is that two things. One is the ranking parameters. So ranking parameters also talk about international students and international faculty is one of the important parameters. Now, Indian institutions predominantly are dominated by Indian students and Indian faculty. Okay. Now, if you look at Europe, Europe is like, like an Indian union, so to say. Okay. Now, if somebody is in France, France to Belgium, you become an international student. I think Karnataka is far more different than Bengal. Okay. Or a Maharashtra far more different than Delhi. Okay. So the point is this, but when the students or the faculty from different states come together in a place, that is not taken as cultural diversity on the context of global ranking. That is one aspect. The other aspect is with respect to the research. I think that is one aspect where the Indian universities, so to say, a little bit, I would say, not as competitive as their international counterparts. Okay. But we have to also understand historically why the way it happened. Okay. Historically, if you look at it, an IIT was essentially meant for teaching, whereas the CSIR was essentially meant for research. So these two were different, were made with different, in a different manner. Okay. Right now, of course, the teaching institutions are also becoming research institutions. But then the question is, there has to be very fine balance, because finally, Indian universities are funded greatly by either the public money for teaching or by the students' tuition fees. There is very little, endowment that the Indian universities get. Okay. And research can only be funded by endowment. If we don't want to take, the student money and to use it for the purpose of research. Okay. So it has to be also a function of the way they are funded. Since Indian universities are predominantly funded by tuition fees, essentially they need to be more teaching institutions. And the new education policy also talks about two types of institution: teaching institutions and research institutions. And I am, I will be a keen observer how these research institutions are funded. Is the government going to fund research institutions, or if there is a, government has to be very, very, what to call, tactful in prioritizing where they fund. You want to fund a research university, or whether you want to, fund the primary education. So essentially, the research funding has to come from the beneficiary of those funds, like the industry bodies or those, government institutions which are going to use that research. Are they going to fund those universities, those research universities? So if you look at the whole issue of funding of, institutions in India, it is predominantly not funded through endowment. I'm using the word not funded through endowment, and hence there is a challenge of research. Otherwise, Indians are very good in both research and teaching, and they are highly successful abroad. And whenever they took it up in India, they are highly successful in India as well. I don't have any doubt about the capability of the Indian, professors or the Indian academia. It is only how do you prioritize it?
True. In fact, that is quite to be seen. And in terms of that, then the next stakeholder groups, which is the students, current who might be in intermediate programs, not in the passing out batches, but who are pursuing the programs right now, the new batches to be admitted, and their parents. So this student and parent stakeholder body, what would you say to them about the new policy? What should they really expect? What is it in for them?
See, I don't know whether whether you saw some of our advertisements which are coming up in the newspaper right now, and that came up before the announcement of the policy. The question is that there is too much of peer pressure or parental pressure on a student when they choose their career. Okay, and lot of them, I don't know how many of them actually stick to the choice of their undergraduate degree. How many of the mechanical engineers, I'm just taking an example, are actually doing job in mechanical engineering, and how many are doing, what I call software development? Nothing wrong. Okay, nothing wrong in that. But the question is, what is it that the student should look at? The student should be allowed to explore and experiment, and should find out what is best for them, rather than being under any pressure either from the peers or from the the parental pressure, what we say. So my suggestion will be that for a student to look at what they would really like to do, what they're good at, explore, and accordingly choose where they would like to be, what kind of career and what kind of education they would like to pursue. But the good thing is, the good news is that the new age universities of today already allows that flexibility to try out multiple things in the initial years, and then decide where, what to call, you would like to which stream you would like to graduate. So if you look at it internationally, the way a student gets admitted in the university is only the undergraduate program, not in the school. Like you don't get into a BBA or a BCom or a BSc or a BA. After getting into the school, a student decides where they would like to go. Okay. So it's a declared major versus undeclared major. In India, it is 100% almost like declared that I get into a BBA. So I think this education policy allows the students to explore, and hence the parents and the students have to think in terms of that, okay, you know, can I get into a college which is my right, which is the time to actually explore and experiment, to actually do it and find out what is it that I am good at, and then decide on the degree or the major, so to say.
Yeah, so in this, I think the academic credit system of transfers or the bank system, I think that is going to work out really well. And the multiple opportunities for entry and exit, perhaps explore something, go work, come back, or maybe even if you have to take a break for circumstantial reason, they can do the same thing, right? So that is something that is possible. How do you take this policy? How do you think the faculty members, teaching community really has something to gain from this, or what is it for those stakeholders?
See, any policy, any statement that we make, okay, there will be some people who will be, very positive about it, and some people who will say, okay, there are so many drawbacks. You cannot make everybody happy. No policy can make everybody happy. Okay. I think this policy is forward looking. Okay. It sets a direction. It also is in sync with the aspiration of the young India. Okay. And from the perspective of the faculty members, it also opens up opportunities for the faculty members. And the idea is this, that faculty members who would also like to continuously update, explore, I think that creates an opportunity, because see, then when you give the student a choice, which means the school which is doing well will also attract more students. A faculty who is doing well will attract more students. So this policy should actually promote merit. Okay, merit based policy, even from the perspective of the faculty members. So faculty members who are really good, I think they will benefit out of this policy.
And in fact, I think the B.Ed system of education also, the Bachelor of Education system, is also undergoing or will be undergoing a rigorous overhauling as well. So that would, I think, take care of the school teaching system as well, and right inputs possibly will also contribute to good teachers coming out if everything falls in place. So last but not the least, the regulation is something that the regulation landscape specifically here for the higher education system, we are looking at in the future that HECI will come in, which is you will have separate verticals for standards, accreditation, regulation. How is it? What's your perspective on that?
See, it is not about what you call what kind of regulator or what kind of regulation system we have. Okay. The same system operates differently if operated differently. Best example is the election commission. Okay. We never knew the role of an election commissioner till the time T.N. Seshan became an election commissioner. Correct. After that, suddenly rules were the same. The election commission was the same. Suddenly, we know what the election commission and the election commissioner is capable of doing. I can tell it from the perspective of standalone management institutions, because I have seen that space for a very long time, whose regulator is All India Council of Technical Education. Now, the kind of reforms that happened after the present chairman, Professor Anil Shashtravudhe came in, is completely different from the experience what we had previously. Okay. So I am not too concerned about the what is the structure of the regulation, just like the election commission. Okay. It is more important how you run that, organization or that authority. Once Dr. Anil Sahasrabudhe became the chairman of AICTE, I think suddenly there was a huge trust which happened between the institutions and the regulator, and both work together. Okay. And that has augured very well. The process became transparent, almost faceless. Okay, at the same time there were regular what you call interaction between the regulator and the institution. We must understand one thing: the regulator and the institution both has to work hand in hand to promote value for students, faculty, and the society. If we are clear about our objective, both the regulator and the institutions, I don't find any challenge. It is how it is run. Just like I said, took the example of the Election Commission and the AICTE. Okay. And I think the two gentlemen, if I had to say, TN Session for Election Commission and Anil Sahasrabudhe for AICTE, I think that's something which is very, very important. The trust and the fact that we can work together. I'm not too concerned who the regulator is, what is the structure. It is what is the intent behind it, that is what matters.
But finally, it would be left to the states to implement.
I think the point is this, that education is concurrent. I think again it is a good thing that we are a democracy, we have a federal structure, and there are a lot of deliberations. We are a diverse country. It is very difficult to have a one-size-fit-all kind of a formula. There will be adjustments, there will be what you call requirements of states, requirements of what you call particular areas which needs to be addressed. Okay, particular, so I think that it will be an iterative process, consultative process, and that's what the beauty of a democracy is. And since we are proud to be a part of the largest democracy, I think that's not a challenge. The fact that we debate, discuss, but we finally work together towards the common goal, I think that's what the whole fun is.
And finally, to ask you, are we going to look forward to a situation perhaps where you are part of a task force in terms of the new education policy being implemented? Would we see you, because there are a lot of good leaders out there in the Indian academia, chancellors, honorable vice chancellors, ex-vice chancellors, everyone who's going to be there. Are we hopeful, or would you not like to say anything on that?
No, as of now, nobody has actually approached me. Okay, nor what to call ever, nor did I ever think of getting into this kind of task force. The whole thing is about right now. The agenda is, it's a new university, a very different university which is coming up, Vijay Bhumi University, which I think is almost in 100% sync with what the new education policy states. And if we can make Vijay Bhumi University a success and an institution or university of eminence, I think that in itself will be a big task accomplished. And if that model works, I think that can be replicated. And I would like to look at myself as a doer rather than a policymaker. So better to be involved in creating the university and demonstrate what can be done rather than getting into policy and task force.
But then don't you think, I mean, that is something that I'm asking, and kindly don't mind if I'm asking you this. When you talk about the DNA of any organization or any corporate body or any institution, like you said, it matters who runs it. So when you
Yes.
DNA, the corporate culture, the policies being implemented, the executor's role becomes also very important. Like you were mentioning about the AICTE chairman, or you're talking about TN Sessions. While you set up your university, I'm not, definitely we are not going to see you focusing less on the upcoming university, but as a sitting honorable vice chancellor, when people like you become part of the task force, Don't you think that would make a change? If not, I'm not talking specifically about you joining any particular task force, but don't you think that thought leaders like you, young leaders like you, joining the task force at any level would really make a great difference in terms of the National Education Policy 2020 really being implemented in spirit and action?
See, whichever way, one can add value to the academia, the education space, particularly which can benefit the country. Okay, if there is a choice between country and organization, the country comes first. Organization and the individual, the organization comes first. So that is how the priorities work. Okay, so of course, anything to be done at a larger level, that will be always a privilege. Okay, but as of now, nobody has talked to me on that. So and we will cross the bridge when we reach it.
Okay, because I have heard in the news that Karnataka is setting up a task force for the education policy being implemented and all that. The fact that Vijay Bhumi being in Mumbai and your IFIM being here, would that stop you if given a chance to contribute something to the task force of the state, if given a chance?
As I said, that always I will be with what I call any opportunity coming to contribute for larger group. I will definitely be willing and interested both. Okay, that's something which will be a privilege, and I will be it will be an honor to do that. I will definitely be involved to the best of my capabilities.
Thank you, Dr. Atish, for this wonderful interview. And I think many academicians and administrators would hope that people like you and so many thought leaders in our sector, Indian education sector, all across the country, the length and breadth of the country. As you said, we have really great set of people in the system. I hope the new education policy 2020 really becomes effective, and leaders like you are also part of the system. And I hope the system also kind of encourages you to not only look at your own organization, but also looks forward to getting the contribution to the Indian academic sector, not only for the institution building purpose, but I think also for nation building purpose, because as you said rightly, our youth of today who are in the schools and colleges are going to live for 100 years. And for them, I think leaders like you would need to set the pace and the foundation for tomorrow. Thank you so much. It has always been a pleasure talking to you. Very inspirational. And I'm sure once I share this video, the viewers and the audience outside are really going to get a lot of motivation. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you so much. Great pleasure being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you once again for being our guest of Research Cell, Dayanand Sagar University. Have a good evening. With that, I sign off.
Thank you.